So, for our listeners, welcome back to Adventures in Shalom. We are talking with Jon and Carla Reinagel, and we're going back a bit today. So, today we're going back to their early story of founding Equip Mozambique. So, recently in our other episode, we talked about how difficult those first 3 years were in Mozambique. So, how was it going back in 2014? Let's start.
Yeah, so like we shared last time, it took a lot of God healing our hearts to even be willing to return, because we just felt like it was just such a toxic place. We had so many just toxic relationships, in those our first Mozambique experience, with just lots of people lying and backstabbing and gossiping and stealing from us, and we were just like, oh, this is what Mozambique is like. But then when we came back, it was refreshing to find out it's like, no, that is not everybody. That is not the whole country. There are so many amazing people here. And that was just kind of revelatory and very healing to have much healthier community. And so we both had just a couple little misgivings, like when we were getting off the plane and then driving through the city again for the first time in 3 years, and we are just like,
Yeah.
what have we done? We just came back to this place that hurt us so much the first time. But then it was just really healing the way God was able to say, no, this is a new season, same place, new season. And so so the people that picked us up from the airport, they dropped us off in this little bitty apartment that's on the fourth floor of this apartment building. And little did we know we would end up living there for 2 years. We thought it was just going to be a temporary thing, but temporary turned into a little bit longer term. And yeah, it was pretty wild. We had to hand wash our clothes in the bathtub, and the power might go out for 16 hours a day, or we might go 2 weeks at a time with no running water and have to haul our water up all those 4 flights of stairs. And so it was like, even though it was urban and like here in the second largest city of the country, it was still very challenging in some ways. But I learned as a missionary kid when my family lived in Russia, see all the challenges as adventures, was how my dad always put it. And so that was just how I tried to keep that perspective and communicate that to the kids as well, as just like, hey, this is maybe a little rough, but it's an adventure. And so one of the biggest adventures my dad had in Russia, and then I also had coming back, was shopping. So it is not anything like shopping in the States, unless you think of it as like everything is a farmer's market. And so that would be the only kind of crossover you might see. We do have some supermarkets, and actually more every year, which is wild. When we first came, we were living in Dondo, like there was literally one supermarket within hundreds of miles, and now there's dozens of them throughout our city of all sizes and shapes. And so it's been really fun to watch that development. But I still did most of my shopping in the marketplaces, and I can remember sometimes going out and like you start to develop a relationship with all these market vendors. And so like I'd always buy my tomatoes from the same person, always buy my carrots from the same person. And it's like, and each item on your shopping list is a separate transaction, a separate interaction. And he was like, okay, hey, Chico, how's it going? And he's like, how many carrots you need this time? And I still remember there's one guy that I always bought my spices from, and he looked exactly like Bob Marley. And it was like, on purpose. Like he was constantly playing Bob Marley music there in the market, had like all the dreads, all the outfits,
Bob
like
Marley.
Bob Marley splayed all over his clothes. And so I just called him Bob Marley. To this day, I don't know what his name actually was. But it's like, hey, Bob Marley, how's it going? I need some cumin this week. And so that was always it was just really fun, because like even shopping was a community thing. And that's something that kind of makes me sad going back to the States. And like, you don't even have to interact with the cashier anymore with all the auto checkouts, self-checkout stuff. And so it's a very, everything's community here. And I really love that. When we came back, we didn't have our own vehicle for the first 7 or 8 months.
Yeah.
And so we had to get around on public transportation, which are these jam-packed little minibuses, kind of like, you think like a large van. where it's supposed to hold, I think, 16 people, and they would usually cram in at least 25. And so it was tight, it was hot and sweaty, it stunk, but like this was how you get
Yeah.
around. And then
Yeah.
I remember one time, going out, doing my shopping on these little mini taxis and stuff, and then having to walk quite a ways back from the bus stop to the apartment and up the 4 flights of steps. And I got out the scale and weighed, like, okay, how much have I been carting around with all this? And it was like 56 pounds that I was having to like haul around with me and then cart up the stairs and be like, okay, done with shopping for the day. Whew.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so yes, shopping was always an adventure. The city would frequently run out of major staples. Sometimes, like even to this day, right now, you can't find eggs anywhere. Eggs are no longer for sale in
Really?
any store. Like, so
Wow.
it's just like, well, forget all of your baking and omelet plans because you can't buy eggs. Sometimes it was flour, sometimes it was other
Mm.
major staples. For many months it was butter. Not a single store in the entire city had butter. And
Wow.
so yeah, it was so yeah, we do have a few little things like that to deal with, but at the same time I still kind of compare our experience to those like original, like hundreds of years ago missionaries who would like leave everything of civilization behind, and not
Yeah.
even have communication back home, not even have any form of like creature comforts whatsoever,
Mm.
but doing it all for Jesus. And I'm just like, okay, well, if they could do that, then I can put up with not having butter for a couple months. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of life coming back. Yeah, when we first cut back that time, 2014, our oldest was 4 years old, and then the one who is now the middle child, then at the time was the youngest, had just turned 2. And
Hmm.
so there were a lot of new dynamics for like, okay, well, now we have kids on the field. Like, the oldest was a baby in our first time around. And so now it's just like, okay, well, now they're getting older. Now they're going to need schooling. We started out homeschooling a little bit because that was actually how I was raised. Like, even when we are in the States and on the mission field, my family always homeschooled. And so I thought, well, let's try this out. I have a rough idea of what it entails because that was my childhood. But we saw it wasn't really working for our kids for a number of reasons, and so we eventually started asking around. And one of my best friends at the time suggested the school that her son went to, and we were able to start them in kindergarten and preschool there, and they absolutely loved it. And it turned out to be just the best fit for them. And so I was really glad they were able to make friends and
Yeah.
get more engaged in the community that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So.
Were they also bilingual pretty quickly?
No, actually, that was one thing that surprised me. So they're all 3 kids are like super bright and intelligent, but I discovered that language is something that takes a significant amount of desire and
Mm.
initiative, and they just
Yeah.
didn't have that. At least, certainly not at first. They've definitely gotten better over the years, but
Hmm.
they just didn't have a desire to learn, and that kind of made me sad.
Well, and then all of their friends had a major desire to learn English,
Yes.
right? And
Oh,
so,
okay.
that always kind of trumped their desire to learn Portuguese. So instead of speaking
Right.
Portuguese with their friends, everybody would just switch to English. And
Mm.
so all of their little friends started talking very good English, right?
Right, right. So I can remember there was one kid that our oldest had hung out with a couple of times, but before he spoke any English, and they would just kind of like sit and blink and stare at each other. It's like, well, guess we can't interact because neither of us speak each other's languages. But then the other kid started going to an English school, his language got better, and then Karen's like, hey, this kid's really fun to hang out with now that he speaks English. And I was like, you realize you could have been the one to learn his language because like you're in his country. But yes, that's a work in progress. We are still working on getting them up to speed with the language, but in the meantime, they are able to help others with their English. So I guess there's a plus side to everything.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about just cultural things that were a challenge to learn at first. There's some
Mm,
things that you talked about with laundry, hardware shopping, things like that.
yeah. The whole thing was just so different. I mean, we had lived in Mozambique before, But we lived on a base, and so it was kind of Western based culture. We had our own little space, and that space is a different concept in Mozambique, right? So people were very silent at night. And that's not the Mozambican way. One of the biggest things for us was we lived in a bit of a party neighborhood. So people were up until 3 or 4 in the morning, and they were just in the
Wow.
middle of the street, right, drinking and
Yeah.
Loud
loud,
music.
loud music. Yeah,
Very loud music.
yeah. And it
Okay.
was, we thought we knew loud before, but there's also the like you're sitting in bed trying to sleep, and your heart is beating out of your chest because it's so loud.
It's like the bed was trembling,
Yeah.
shaking with the beat. It
Right.
was like on the fourth floor.
Right. And that's
Wow.
that's one of the things about not having windows. So we only had screens, and
Not in that apartment, but yeah.
what? In that one we
No, we had windows. Okay. This was a fun one. So there was one point when like the window broke, and so there was like no glass in it, just the frame left, and I just wrapped it with like plastic saran wrap so that we could still close it and not have the rain pouring in, but we'd still let light
Oh,
in.
yeah.
And so you find fun little creative ways around the problems and issues.
right, yeah, all the windows were handmade, and so a lot of them didn't fit together exactly right, and so there was always still some music
Wow.
and everything kind of escaping and rain.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Wow.
it was definitely an adventure. The space thing was a big thing because in Donda we had our space and we could decide who came in. In Mozambique, like the neighbors are always like, they'll just come over whenever they feel like it. And that's what it means to be in community. And so you'd have people at your door kind of fairly frequently.
Wow.
And yeah, there was a joy in that. And just
Yeah.
like Carla was talking about with connecting, it's a major frustration if you come from the U.S. or Western culture, just how hard it is to get
Mm-hmm.
something done.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember just having a joy in the number of connections and the partnerships that you could actually have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. Another one was outside of base life, we just couldn't run by the clock anymore. We had to run by other people's times, and I can remember the one time after being here for a couple of years, I'm like, okay, now I understand how to be Mozambican. I planned 3 meetings for 10 o'clock, knowing that one person would show up on time, one person would show up an hour late, and one person wouldn't show up at all. And it happened exactly like that. I'm like, okay,
Wow.
I can do this. And so I found ways around, kind of our need to be on time for things, and kind
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
the Mozambican,
Mm-hmm.
time, you know.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
one thing that really helped us in some of our like missions and culture reading before
Mm-hmm.
going into missions. One book
Mm-hmm.
was talking about the difference between a time-based culture versus an event-based culture, where they're just like, oh, well, chronologically, things will happen in this order. What time? Who cares? Like, this little thing does not
Mm-hmm.
determine anything in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're just not slaves to the clock like we are in the West. Like the whole
Yeah.
time is money blows their minds. Nobody thinks that.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks time is money. Nobody thinks time is an investment. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
time just like is.
You have
You're just existing.
Mm-hmm.
And so like
Mm-hmm.
why would that
Mhm.
have the same value? And so that took a little
Yeah.
while to really get used to. I would say more so for German John than it did for Italian me, because my family was always pretty loosey goosey with time, a lot more so than his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
an interesting thing in this area when I started to learn some of the local language, the word for white people here doesn't translate to literally white, and so I started asking a little bit more about it, and it turns out that the origin is the restless people, and people would explain it like the people that don't stop and eat mangoes when it's mango season. Right. And then they run in, like they do surveys, they do whatever they're doing, and then they leave without eating the mangoes.
Wow.
They're just like the Mozambicans are like, yeah, we don't understand that. Like when there's
Huh.
mangoes and they're ripe, you sit down and you enjoy a mango.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's just in many ways it is a healthier way of being. And the
Mm,
first 3 years we were here, we ran on a Western schedule. We did Western things. It was Western projects. And
mm-hmm,
during this time, we really just came to serve and to live and understand what it was like to be Mozambican before we started any projects. And that's a
mm,
lot of what we were doing.
mm,
Sometimes I would go out and I would go visit somebody's field. It would be, a 5 hour adventure out there, sometimes on the back of a motorcycle. You could take a shoppa
mm,
out halfway and then a motorcycle out. You'd visit
yeah,
somebody's field because they wanted you to go visit their field, and you'd spend some
yeah,
time with them, and then you travel back on a motorcycle and on a shoppa.
right.
Shoppa is the minibus, by the way.
Yeah, the minibus.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
travel back on a minibus. Yeah, and so that was my day, and I had to get used
Yeah,
to, just being able to say I did one thing today, and that's okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was able to do it with somebody, right? And it was
Mm,
very much it's very much learning to value the people you have around you in the moment instead of the
mm-hmm,
projects or the accomplishments. So
mm, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I can remember
That's yeah.
major difficulties just doing even simple hardware, fixes. So I was trying to
Mm-hmm,
replace our light bulb with a light fixture we had purchased, and it took me six
mm-hmm.
different hardware stores before I found a bolt that would actually work to connect it.
Jeez.
And yeah, and the whole time you just spend an entire day looking for a single bolt. And is that okay, right, or not? And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so in Mozambican culture, you never do things alone. You always go with somebody else, and it's
Mm-hmm,
more about building that connection than it is about getting the work done, because you have no idea what's
mm-hmm,
going to happen, along the road.
mm-hmm,
And if you have somebody else there, then maybe they can help you with it. So yeah,
hmm.
it's fun to learn that, culturally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't I feel like I would explode. I don't know because that's the way I've lived my
Hmm.
life. I think most Americans live their life by accomplishment and by task and
Yeah.
time and all the things. So efficiency, but that is really
Hmm.
cool of how you guys came like without judgment and just like
Hmm.
what is the value of this culture of living this way. And I think that's so cool.
And things move
Hmm.
faster that way too. When you build deep
Mm,
relationships with people, then you can do the projects on top of it.
hmm.
And
Hmm.
in Africa, you can't start a project without getting that first connection.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's something that it's actually a key thing in the U.S. as well.
Hmm.
Relationships, organizations move at the speed of
Yeah,
trust, and when you
yeah,
have those
yeah.
connections, then you can build bigger things. It's just, I think, a little bit more obvious in our context.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, it is true, like Americans always say it's who you know, but it's also people know when you're just trying to climb the ladder, like you're trying to meet people to climb the ladder. And so I love that idea of like it's actually not about climbing the ladder, it's about like really knowing the person next to you and
Yeah.
what you're saying, John, and the episode before like really seeing people's gifts. I think that's a
Hmm.
beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And not just like trying to, the American way is sometimes like we see the person who like we're trying to get to that spot in life. And so we're trying to meet that person for that reason. Like they're the
Yeah.
gatekeeper, the leader, or whatever. And so we hustle, hustle,
Hmm.
hustle. But it's really, yeah, it's like, how can you see the people who are
Hmm.
are looking up to you or who you can serve or things like that, so that's really
Hmm.
cool.
Well, and for us too, there was a major change because in our first 3 years, we were the leaders, right? We walked in, and a
Hmm.
couple months later, then we were the base directors, and it was really good. We came to serve. We told everybody, like, just put us to work, we'll
Hmm.
serve.
The second time, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the second time, and we realized how much more we had to learn.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I think every healthy relationship is a give and take, and you need, if you've got people mentoring you, you need to be mentoring other people, and like that's just kind
Hmm.
of healthy
Hmm.
living. And we got to do that in a way that we didn't before. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, as Americans, like I don't think we understand in America how kind of powerful our passport is or just being American is, but
Mm,
it's a very clear thing in Mozambique, right? It
mm.
kind of put us on top of a hierarchy, and we didn't want to be there. We had to climb off and say, we just want to
Yeah.
be like you guys. But that was really where we learned the culture a lot more.
Mhm.
Mm.
Five stars, by the way, would recommend for anybody who's called to be a missionary. I did not. I learned maybe 15% about Mozambique from being here in a mission base, compared to 85% I learned just living in the community and
Yep.
being
Yep.
among other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's so fitting that at the beginning of this we were talking about immersive filmmaking because that's one of the
You
things
did that
that
on
we're
purpose, didn't
talking.
you?
No, it was unintentional. But that's one thing we learn as actors. Like the true actors who are real artists are the ones who are learning the people who they're going to represent, who they're telling their story or whatever it may be. They go live with them. They go learn from them. The actors in the movies that turn out just sort of superficial are the ones that they think they know what this person's life was like or
Hmm.
what their culture might be like, and then they try to present it. But
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
didn't really immerse themselves. They didn't really take the time to learn. They didn't humble
Hmm.
themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think that a
Yeah.
lot of what it sounds like you're doing is humbling yourself. Like,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
I have things to learn, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
A key verse for us has always been kind of Philippians 2, where it talks about the gnosis of Jesus, or the incarnation. It said,
Hmm.
do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself.
Hmm.
And it says you must have the same attitude as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, didn't consider equality to God as something to be cling to, but rather he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant. And if Jesus made himself nothing, how much more do we need to make ourselves nothing? And yeah, if Jesus came as a baby, right, then how much more do we need to come in the same position, or how much more can we?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there was a lot that we learned during this time. Yeah, I mean, when we started to work in the church, we were really shocked at just the passion that people had for scripture, for the word, for the church.
Mhm.
And I started to really understand people's gifts and skills in a different way, particularly on the educational front. So when I started to talk to people, and I would give them a book, and say, "Hey, read this," then the comprehension was pretty low when I did something like that. But when I told them, "Hey, do what I do," then the comprehension was way above what I actually expected. So they were better than the American college students I was used to working with, when it was follow and do exactly what I say. And this kind of experiential learning, and I was shocked with that. And they would pick up things in terms of mannerisms, or I would click a computer twice, or something, and then they would pick up the mannerism too. And I'm like, well, no, not that. I did that on accident. uh, but it was
Yeah.
wild to see. There were different intelligences used in different ways, and if you've ever spent that many, any time on the African continent, you start to realize how intelligent people are with languages, as well. Most
Yeah.
people speak three, four, five languages, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's because communication is so very important. And I started to see that more because we just came to serve, right?
So yeah, tell me more about what is Mozambican church like?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we came back that time 2014, we were part of a pretty large church, probably what, like 5,000-ish members.
Mhm.
Pretty big. They met in a big outdoor stadium type setting. And we were just really touched when we started seeing, this church where a lot of, deep life transformation was happening. At least once a week or so, they would have a testimony time when people would come forward and share what they'd been going through and what God had brought, how God had changed them. And they were talking about addictions being abandoned or families being restored, or they would bring all of their like witchcraft articles and things that they had been using and believing in the past to have burned there publicly and saying, I'm leaving this behind and following Jesus alone. And all the way up to and including like demonic deliverances, which is maybe a conversation for another day. But yeah, it was just really wild to see how many people were just so set on fire for Jesus, and their lives being just really changed. And many of the churches here, that one, and then tons of others that we've encountered, they're so much more involved than just a Sunday morning club.
Yeah.
Many of them have services throughout the week. Sometimes the one we were in, it was almost every single night. There was something going on. Many times another thing in the afternoon, sometimes other things in the morning. And so there was almost always something going on. And so it was a good way to provide healthy community. These people would see each other all the time and really get to know each other. Every once in a while that was a bit of a frustration when it felt like an obligation. It's like, oh man, church again. Especially coming from a more American background where we had like maybe 2 services a week, maybe. Level of dedication just really struck us. Sometimes they would have like all night prayer vigils, which, I mean, imagine announcing that in your church. Hey guys, we're gonna have this all night prayer vigil. Like, how many people would show up? Here it was like 90% of the church would show up for the all-night prayer vigil because they are just that dedicated. They would say, all right, everybody, we're doing a 40-day fast. And everybody would be like, okay, 40 days. We're doing a 40-day fast, congregation-wide. And just the level of dedication of their faith was just really humbling, to be honest. We were just like, man, we feel like the wussies here. I can remember being in one meeting where the leader in the meeting asked, like, hey, how many people have how many like total strangers have you talked to about Jesus this week? And everyone's just like, oh yeah, I had like at least 10 conversations like that, or 5 conversations here. Oh, you need to start working a little harder on this. And it's just like, man, I feel like the worst missionary in the room now, because all these other people are way better missionaries than I am. Like, what's even?
It sounds athletic.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like athletes. Like you're pushing yourself to become the best. I like it.
Right.
There was a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but like when you make Jesus your goal, what is possible? And I was just really blown away by the level of dedication that so many of them had. Like faith is everything to them, and that's very played out in their lives. And I was yeah, and so there were a lot of times I'm just like, what am I doing here? These people are way better at this than I am. But which is why I think it's worthwhile to say why so many of our projects are a little bit more practical in nature. Like, we do have some that are very much spiritual in nature, but we see bringing the practical elements of the kingdom of God, of shalom, wholeness, as being a big part of our calling, because the local church, we feel, is doing an amazing job of evangelism. And and especially because we don't feel like that's our personal gifting, we're like, okay, you guys run with that, you're doing amazing. And for people to hear the gospel from someone else of their own culture is probably better anyway. And so we're going to come in behind that and say, okay, now how can we make sure that, because Jesus wasn't 100% spiritual in all of his talks either. Like, he was physically healing people, he was physically helping everywhere that he could, and so he was restoring community, restoring relationships. And so we see there are a few places where there were some gaps that we can come in and fill. But the church as a whole, we found to be a lot stronger than we expected, actually.
Right. Yeah, I would talk to people about scripture memory and things, and I came and I thought, oh, I'm going to teach the Bible, and I met people that were knew it better than I did, and it really kind of broke my paradigm a little bit. And our particular church, like, it was such a stark contrast, because in our other denomination, or in the other work that we did, it was with a missionary led church, and everything was stopped. And, if you wanted somebody to do something, you had to pay them to do it. And, here people were just like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. And
Volunteering all over the
volunteering,
place.
yeah, for anything really, and it was incredible what kind of fire and life was in the church. So yeah, there was a lot of things that we realized, whoa, we've got this backwards. And the ways that we saw needed help definitely changed through the years too. In general, like there's so many people that come to Africa for church planting. Well, the Africans are so good at church planting, it's almost like, not it's not nearly as needed. But then you walk outside the church, and people are dying in hospitals. There's problems with the transportation system. People don't want to send their kids to school. And you're like, well, where's the kingdom of God in these other places? And so, the church is very isolated into those four walls of the church.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even kind of some of the poverty alleviation ministries that we saw, the things that the missionaries focused on most of the time when they get here, the number one thing they see is kids in the street, and so they start orphanages, right? There's been a very long kind of drawn out thing with orphanages in Africa and other places. What we saw was there is a need, but there are social systems for orphans much more than there are for widows. And so, we started to see widows as the number one need. And you've got the big four that are kind of constantly mentioned in scripture. You've got the orphans, the widows, the foreigners, and the poor. And those are constantly mentioned. And in an American context, we do a pretty good job of treating widows. We've got systems, we've got job support systems where if the guy dies, then they support the widow for X number of years. You've got government assistance programs for them, and we don't do a good job with orphans. In the U.S., and so that's oftentimes where the church is focused. And then in Mozambique, it's the opposite. There are orphans, but many times the uncles will take them in, or the extended family, or somebody from the community will take in these kids. Almost everyone that we know has at least one extra kid that works with them and that lives in their house. So it's a very common thing to have at least one, maybe two other kids, and that's just not the reality in the U.S. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the widows were living in desperate poverty, and some of this time in the church really helped us realign in terms of what do we actually need to do here to meet the biggest needs of Mozambican society.
Well, what I'm taking from this is the discovery process is a very humble one, but a good one that where I feel like sometimes maybe as in ministry we miss um
Yeah.
that calling. But
Don't skip that part. Yeah. Now everybody wants
yeah,
to
yeah.
shortcut that particular
Mm-hmm.
part, but you're just going to shortcut your fruitfulness later.
Yeah.
If you
Mm.
end up doing that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the other major
Mm-hmm.
mistake that oftentimes you make in missions is you go to the mission school and you think that's your education training. And then you get on the
Mm.
field and you think you know everything already. And you
Mm-hmm.
really have to learn and listen to the people around you. Humility is a bit of a superpower in kind of any context. But I think especially, what you were talking about here. I can remember early on, I had to go through my notes twice when I had a meeting with somebody. Most of the time, I thought I understood what they were talking about at the time, but then many times, the next day or 2 days afterwards, I realized what they were actually trying to say. And when you're dealing with a different culture, that kind of stuff happens on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
And kind of a funny way, a major cultural shift here is you can't tell somebody older than you or more powerful in hierarchy. You can't tell them no, right? And so
Oh.
how do you communicate when you can't tell people no? There's many things in terms of communication that if you're not very humble, you will miss, right? And so when I first got here, I thought every yes was a yes, and then people wouldn't show up for events, or wouldn't show up for meetings, and I realized that culturally you couldn't say no to somebody who was older or you thought had more, more
Authority.
authority. And so there was a big difference between, yes, I will totally be there, and, well, yes, I'll be there, right? And so if there's the hesitation there, even if it's literally the same words, you can't expect them to show up. And then, I was disappointed because they're not there, and then they were saying, well, I tried to tell them.
Which is another reason texting doesn't work in that context.
Yes, texting is a problem.
Because
Oh, yeah.
yes just looks
Yeah.
like yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't get the tone of voice.
Right.
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 Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it was very
Yeah.
interesting, and there's so much I learned just through humility and communication, where I stopped and I thought twice or three times about what somebody said, just to kind of understand it.
Yeah.
And then I realized the first 3 years I was frustrated with people not giving me feedback in terms of what was working, what wasn't, especially the times where I
Mm-hmm.
discovered something that wasn't working on the bass.
Long after it had really been a problem.
Right, long after it had been a problem. Like the brakes would go out on a car and nobody would tell me. And so I would just pick it up and start driving. And I was like, well, the brakes don't work. Did you tell anybody? And they're like, oh, well, no,
Yeah.
that wasn't my job.
Oh,
And
no.
right, right. And so how do you lead and manage in a situation, like that? I was always really very frustrated, but I realized later that some of it was definitely communication.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you're dealing with a people that have been oppressed in the past, and you are a culture that has been very overly aggressive, then
Mm.
most people will not give you feedback. They won't be honest with you until they know it's safe to be
Mm.
honest with you.
Mhm.
Right. So one of the biggest
Interesting.
things with
Yeah.
us now, is that first time somebody makes a major mistake. Right. And
Mm.
what do they do? Do they hide it? Do they tell you? And so we always value
Yeah.
when somebody comes to us and tells us a mistake. And I can remember one guy crashed one of the servers, and it took down all of the tech projects we were working on. And he was horrified. He thought he would lose his job and everything. And he came pretty quickly to me and said, hey, I accidentally deleted the home folder here. Help. And I was so grateful. And I really kind of took this lesson to heart. And the first thing that I said was, thank you so much for telling me. Because he told me exactly what was wrong, then we were
Yeah.
able to fix it in about an hour. Whereas it would have taken me like 4 days if I hadn't
Yeah.
realized what was going on. Yeah. So that was a
Yeah.
major kind
Yeah.
of shift in our communication.
Right. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about one of the projects that you started a few years back, about, and
Mm-hmm.
we talked just briefly about this before, but the Fountain of Life Audio Bible project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this was a really amazing thing that we felt like God really inspired us even before we hit the ground. And so while we were still shipwrecked in Malta, like we talked about in a previous episode, we had this inspiration to create a way for people to get the Bible in audio in their heart languages. Because there's three major barriers for people here getting the word of God. And, of course, the first one is the language itself. But then we discovered there's tons of organizations that do a really good job of coming in and spending years and years among the people translating the scriptures into all these languages so they can hear it in their, or so they can encounter God in their heart language. And then the second part of that is recording it into audio, because a lot of these languages, they literally have nothing written in them. They don't even have a writing system that is exclusively an oral language. So even after you have
Yeah.
translated this beautiful Bible and you hand it to them in print, they're like, what do I do with this? So even a literate person who had been can read in Portuguese, because all school is in Portuguese, you hand them this Bible in Sena or whatever, then they're like, I can't read this because nobody reads Sena. It just doesn't exist. And so the second step is to record it into audio to be a more natural format for them. And then the third
Yeah.
step then is, how do you get it out? And the more research we did, the more we found out that this was the part that was missing. Because there were places that absolutely understood the need for it to be an audio and were recording these translations, but then getting it out to people was really, really hard. And so first we started with this kind of mobile formatted website that eventually grew into the app called Fountain of Life. So yeah, one of my favorite stories from this early time after we had released this was I had a missionary friend named Kim that actually lived next door to us. And she absolutely loved the project and was telling everybody about it. But then she also wanted to use it very creatively as a way to learn one of the local languages. And so she started listening to the audio Bible using this, on her phone, listening to the local language called Ndao. And then as she was listening, she was like, wait a minute. I think I recognize this voice as the voice of the pastor of the church that she was attending at the time. And so she ran to the church and was just like, Pastor Lucas, is this you? Is this your voice? Did you ever record an audio Bible at any point in your time? And he was like, oh my gosh, yes! 12 years prior to that, this group had come through, had hired all of these local pastors and church leaders to record the Bible in audio, and even he didn't get a copy of it. Once it was finished and edited and
Oh no.
completed, the only place that it was never distributed, effectively. The only place you could get it was in South Africa, which is a whole country away. And so he was like, this is the first time I've heard my own voice, back to me, reading this Bible.
Hmm.
And he was just so thrilled and told everybody in his church, obviously, and everywhere that
Yeah.
he went, like, hey guys,
Yeah.
you can listen to the Bible in your own language using this app. And it was just really exciting to see its take off there. But it really goes to illustrate how poor the distribution model was prior to that.
Yeah, the Fountain of Life project for us was, just a major, revelation, I guess. Not the original event, but talking to people, and showing them technology. Like if you've ever developed an app or any kind of any kind of product, it's very painful to sit there and have somebody else use your product and you not telling them how to do it, because that's literally what's going to happen when they download it. And just seeing how somebody would use it, I started to realize, wow, the ability of people to just pick up a new piece of software and use it from scratch is very low. And I came from a web background, and so I thought using websites was easy, and so I kind of skipped over apps for a long time. But the response when I was showing people a website versus showing people an app was night and day different. So when I started to realize that, then we started to put a lot more things on apps. And an app is just so much simpler to use than a
Hmm.
website is. You don't have to know how to use a URL, or anything. You can just download something from the Play Store, and you just do a quick search on it. Whereas, if you do a search on Google, then you'll get tons of different websites. You don't always get to the right one. And one of my favorite statistics
Yeah.
actually about Nigeria, is when you ask Nigerians how many people use the internet versus how many people use WhatsApp, 10% more people, WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, right? So 10% more people say they use these social media platforms than use the internet. And it's a lot of kind of understanding that, we know, wait, hold on, that's built on the internet. Using social media is using the internet. But not everybody kind of has that same perspective. Yeah, and so that's very much
Yeah.
how it is in Mozambique. And for me, I didn't realize how important it was to get the language and the Bible out to people in their heart language until I sat down with some of these ladies. So some widows or people that, even if they spoke Portuguese well, if you open the Bible in their heart language, then there is just a different perspective. There's a smile ear to ear, like you have valued them and you've listened to them. And if you speak Portuguese to somebody, it's, they're grateful. But
Mm-hmm.
if you speak their heart language to them, then they feel valued in a way that I don't think you can ever understand as a native English speaker.
Well, and
Because we don't feel valued when somebody speaks English. We're like, oh, okay, great, you speak the language that you're supposed to, right?
right, right.
Yeah, and it's just not like that.
Yeah.
Well, one of
Yeah.
the taglines we put with the audio Bible app was that Jesus speaks your language,
Yeah.
which that can be revelatory for people. It's
Mhm.
it's like this isn't a foreign
Mhm.
religion with this, that you have to interact with him in a foreign language.
Mhm.
Like, he sees you and he speaks your language and he speaks your heart.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that was just really necessary.
Yeah. And a lot of the churches
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and many of the believers think that they've got this kind of hierarchy of languages where, especially in our area of Mozambique, where if you can't speak Portuguese, then you speak your native tongue. If you can speak Portuguese, then you speak that. If you can speak English, then that's better. Still, and you try to always like go up this hierarchy of languages, and you even do it in prayer. So there's a lot of people that will pray in English even though they speak
Yeah.
Portuguese most of the time. And it's a bit of a weird thing, and
Yeah.
we've always
Yeah.
tried to value as much as possible the local language. Yeah. Just give you an idea of where the Found of Life app and project is now. There's been almost 100,000 people that have received the Bible in audio in over 50 languages of Mozambique, Angola, Sao Tome and Principe, and Guinea-Bissau, which are other Portuguese-speaking countries in Mozambique or
In
in
Africa.
Africa. And yeah, it's grown and evolved. We have an app. There's a WhatsApp bot also, and we added AI this year because when people were looking for Bibles and looking for specific chapters, oftentimes they wouldn't be able to find it. So we added an AI to help people get specific chapters. It also makes sure you don't have to spell things perfectly. Nobody has to understand how to spell Philemon in order to get there. And so that's been hugely helpful. And WhatsApp, there's these new developments that we put on WhatsApp means that the Bible is a 20% of the cost that it used to be. Because here there's kind of cost advantages to using WhatsApp versus
Regular
regular
data.
internet. And everybody already knows how to
Okay.
use WhatsApp. And
Yeah.
so those were two reasons why we were building it in the first place. And the missionaries and the other pastors that work in the Muslim North have given us another advantage. They've said that Muslims that are curious about the faith have been using it because they don't want to download a Bible. Oftentimes, cell phones are communal. Your dad will see it or your cousin or something, and so there's a deep shame
Yeah.
associated with that. Whereas everybody has WhatsApp already, and you can download the Bible, you can use WhatsApp, and yeah, for them it's just a lot safer. That's actually why on Fountain of Life we don't have a literal picture of the Bible. We've got a book with a fountain coming out of it as the logo, just to make it a little bit more safe for sensitive contexts.
What's going on this week? Tell the people a little bit about what y'all are doing.
Mhm.
All right. Well, yesterday we had a really fun kind of a Secret Santa gift exchange within the sewing school. And I just loved how healing it is to watch them, people who went from being a constant, needy receiver to becoming a generous giver, and just the joy on their faces to share something that they had earned and worked for and been able to like give and bless someone else, just healed something in them. And that was just so exciting to see. So much fun.
Well, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been another episode of Adventures in Shalom. And we have enjoyed so much these first 4 episodes, and please be on the lookout for our next series coming out soon, where we will tackle some more of the adventures that the Reinagals have been on and have experienced and have created. um, so yeah, there are several ways if you want to get connected with Equip Mozambique. There's socials, so you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Equip Moz. There's also the website equipmoz.org where you can sign up for the newsletter, where you can read about the different projects going on. You can donate financially, and you can really get involved with this incredible organization. So we invite you to do that. But until next time, we will see you for Adventures in Shalom, round 2, next time.
All right.
All right.